Refused to take care of my niece after she called me a slur, taught by her dad, until her parents apologize. Now my family is falling apart. I'm a 29-year-old guy, my wife's 30, and we have 2 kids, ages 3 and 5. My wife works full-time at an office, while I work from home with extremely flexible hours. As long as I meet my deadlines, no one cares when, how, or how many hours I put in, except for a few Zoom meetings. My younger sister, Barb, 26, and her husband Nick, 30, live nearby. They both have full-time jobs too and have a daughter, Tracy, who's 5. Because my work situation is so comfortable, once our kids started daycare, we all just sort of decided I'd handle pickup and drop-off for Tracy along with my own kids. Honestly, I didn't mind. My kids loved spending that time with their cousin, and I got along great with Tracy. She always seemed to think I was the cool uncle. Tracy is a sweet, generally well-behaved kid. Most days, after daycare, I'd bring the 3 kids home to my place, make snacks or dinner, and later Barb would swing by to pick up Tracy. Everything seemed to be working fine, until a few days ago. That day, the 5-year-olds were watching Bluey in the living room while I was making snacks with my 3-year-old. Suddenly, I heard yelling. I rushed out just in time to hear my son shouting, "My dad's not a girl." And Tracy snapping back, "He is. That's like a girl." Word was in our native language, but the insult meant the same thing, and using it in this way is not the same as just referring to someone's sexuality. I was completely taken aback. I immediately turned off the TV and sat them down. I began explaining to Tracy that what she'd said was a very bad word, something we never call people, especially family, and that besides, I'm not a girl. I told her she needed to apologize because it hurt my feelings, and in our family, that's not what we do. Tracy insisted she shouldn't have to, because her dad, Nick, called me that and he wasn't in trouble. I was stunned. I told her, whatever grown-ups say, it's still wrong and she ought to be sorry for hurting me. Because Tracy really is a good kid, she apologized, but I could see she was confused. I talked with her a bit longer, trying to dig for more information, though getting straight answers from a 5-year-old isn't easy. What came out, though, shocked me. Apparently, Nick had told Barb, right in front of Tracy, that men shouldn't be sitting at home all day and doing childcare, that cooking and cleaning is women's work, and that I was basically a girl, since I did those things and my wife earns more than me. I tried to explain to Tracy, simply, that grown-ups can work from home or out of the house, that just because a woman works in an office doesn't mean she's not a woman, and that dads can do cooking or cleaning too, but I didn't want to dwell on it long with her. This wasn't her fault. I debated for a bit about how to handle this. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of the kids or have an impulsive conversation with my sister, so I talked it out with my wife that night. She was furious. We both agreed, Nick and Barb owed me an apology, and until that happened, I had every right to step back. So I called Barb and told her what happened. Her response? "It's just a word, you're blowing this out of proportion. Nick obviously doesn't dislike you." I told her that wasn't the point, that talking trash about me in front of Tracy was beyond disrespectful and the least she could do was stand up for me. She told me Nick is just like that, and I needed to stop being dramatic. That was enough. I told her to go pick up her own kid from now on, and hung up. Yeah, it was abrupt and maybe harsh, but I felt taken for granted. I do all this for them, I'm family, and now suddenly I'm not even due a basic apology? My wife stood by me. She told me not to cave until I got a real apology. The next 2 days were the weekend, so no daycare, and I expected Barb would at least reach out. Radio silence. It almost seemed intentional, as if she didn't believe I really meant it, which only made me angrier. And then Monday came around, and the call started. I dropped my 2 kids at daycare but left Tracy for Barb to deal with. I ignored Barb's calls all morning. Petty? Maybe. But after a weekend of her silence, it felt justified. Just after noon, she tried again. This time I picked up, intending to explain I was still waiting for that apology. But I didn't get the chance. She ripped into me, calling me irresponsible, telling me how I'd made her late for work, that I'd totally flaked. I calmly told her I'd warned her, she had 2 days to make other arrangements, and if she didn't, that wasn't my fault. She kept ranting, so I hung up. She kept calling and texting, demanding I resume pickups for Tracy. I just responded that I wouldn't, then ignored everything else. When I arrived at daycare to collect my kids, Tracy was waiting for me to take her, too, but I had to turn her down. That tore me apart. She's 5, completely innocent in this, and suddenly she doesn't get to go play with her cousins. I just didn't want to reward her parents' behavior. I explained simply to her that her mom and I had an argument, but I'd pick her up again once things were worked out. She didn't take it well, of course she didn't, but I apologized, gathered my kids, and left. Not long after, my mom called. Barb had roped her into picking up Tracy, and since my mom is disabled, it was a struggle for her. She wanted to know why I was being mean to Barb. I told her the whole story, hoping she'd see my side. But she just said, "You know how Nick is." That infuriated me. If this is really how Nick is, I don't see why I should be doing free daycare for him or letting my name get dragged around like this. I said so. She accused me of making a mountain out of a molehill and told me to just be the bigger man. I told her all I wanted was a damn apology, but apparently that was too much. I told her I was done, wished her good luck with Tracy, and hung up. That night, Nick himself called. I almost didn't answer, but I hoped, for 1 second, it might be the apology this whole fiasco should have started with. Instead, it was just more of the same. According to him, my behavior was putting Barb through undue stress, and how could I do this to my own family? He told me that since we're family, how could I be upset at him joking about me in front of his kid, the very same niece that I care for every day? I asked him directly, how could he think it's acceptable to talk shit about me to Tracy when I'm the one who's always there for her? He laughed it off, saying he was just joking, that it was all in good fun. But it wasn't fun for me. I told him straight, it hurt, and I wanted an apology. That's when he exploded, shouting that I was a FT who can't take a joke, calling me a hysterical little girl. That was it for me. I told him to fuck off, said I was done, and hung up. Right after, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, Barb and my mom, call after call, all ignored. Then Barb hit me with a text, accusing me of being petty and saying it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price. My patience snapped. I shot back, it's not fair for Tracy to pay the price for her parents being ungrateful pieces of shit. The only thing Barb sent in response was a stream of angry, texted yelling, telling me she was about to lose her job and that I was being cruel to both her and mom. I stayed firm, I told her I was done, and unless her next message was an apology, I'd block her. She never apologized, so I blocked her. These past few days, it's been my mom picking Tracy up from daycare, and it's been hell. Every time, I see the disappointment on Tracy's face when I tell her grandma will be coming instead. She hates it, she tells me straight out she isn't having fun with grandma and just wants to come over to my place. It's tearing me apart. But it's not my fault, no one, not a single adult, has apologized to me. The only person who said sorry is Tracy, the 5-year-old. If I let this go, I know I'm just showing my family it's alright to ignore my boundaries and disrespect me. But at the same time, God, I love my niece, and the last thing I want is to traumatize her or have her end up resenting me for this. She's a great kid. None of this is her fault. So now, I'm left wondering, am I the asshole here? What do I do? The idea that Nick might actually want Barb to lose her job just to keep her at home, honestly, that hadn't occurred to me before, but now that it's in my head, I can't shake it. It makes me worry for Barb, but I also know there's nothing I can do unless she finally sees that her excuses for Nick, saying that's just how he is, stop overreacting, aren't ever going to work with me. I have a feeling my mom won't be an option for childcare much longer. She's already struggling, and I doubt Tracy's parents can afford much else. They're stretched thin just paying for their house. I'm hoping I get a real chance to talk to Barb about all of this, ideally because she understands my side, but I'll settle for just being the only option left. No matter what, I'll make sure Tracy knows I love her, and that none of this mess was ever her fault. Update 1. To clarify things, my dad passed away from a heart attack 2 years ago. Honestly, it wasn't much of a shock. He smoked a ton, lived pretty unhealthily, and this wasn't even his first heart attack. Right up until the end, he was a great dad and an even better grandpa. But losing him meant my mom was left alone, and she doesn't work. She's got MS, which, for now, is mostly steady but always lurking. It gets a bit worse over time and flares up with stress. Those flares mean that when she recovers, she never quite returns to the level she was, so the number one priority is keeping her stress-free. Luckily, my dad had life insurance, so her house is paid off and there's a small cushion of money. But she still has a caretaker coming by 3 times a week to help clean, cook, shop, all those basic things she can't easily handle herself, and she can't actually afford that, so my wife and I cover the bills. Me and my wife actually manage pretty well financially, better off, in fact, than Barb and Bill, who are up to their ears in loans, a big mortgage, fancy house, and nicer cars than sense. After rolling all this around in my head for days, it was something someone said, imagining being in Tracy's position, that finally tipped the scales for me. I took the whole day off work just to sit with these thoughts, to really work out what was right. As much as I wanted to stand my ground, I couldn't stomach the idea of hurting Tracy in the process. She's like one of my own, my kids love her too, and none of this is her fault. I unblocked my sister because if I'm going to keep being there for Tracy, there has to be a line of communication. I talked things over with my mom, who was, once again, incredibly stressed about picking Tracy up, which, with her MS, takes a real toll on her. I told her that I'd handle it, but that I was coming over and she had to hear me out. She agreed. We sat and talked for a long time, and I made sure to keep things honest, no snark, no lashing out this round. I explained that it didn't matter if Nick's behavior was justified or not, I'm her son, and if I'm upset, that should matter, at the very least enough for her not to side against me instantly. I even brought up that rocking the boat analogy that stuck with me. And finally, I think it got through. She apologized, we hugged, she's truly not confrontational and always tries to keep the peace, but this time, she'd gone about it wrong. I'm not saying I'm suddenly not mad, but she's my mom and she owned up to it. I explained that she shouldn't be covering for me anymore, because that just means I'm left with no leverage when confronting Nick or Barb. She listened, really listened, and was receptive. Then, I texted my sister that we needed to talk and that I'd drop Tracy off at her place that night. All I got was a stoic thumbs up, but that's my sister for you. Picking Tracy up from daycare, she lit up, genuinely overjoyed to see me. She was actually so possessive, she barely left my side all afternoon. It was sweet, but a little heartbreaking too, seeing what my absence has meant. I did my best to explain that she wasn't in any trouble, that I wasn't angry with her, only with her parents, and that we'd have to work that out, but I'd do everything possible not to let her down again. That seemed to help. That evening, after dropping Tracy off, I sat down with Barb and Nick. I laid it all out. Mom would not be covering for them anymore, and if they didn't let me finish what I had to say, I was leaving, and they'd better figure out new arrangements for Tracy. Didn't mean it, but they didn't need to know that. They were annoyed, but they listened. Finally, I made it clear, I didn't care if their apology wasn't sincere, but I demanded one anyway. After years of looking after Tracy without so much as a thank you, this had become a matter of principle for me. So, this is how things go from here. First, I'm not dropping Tracy off in the mornings anymore, for the foreseeable future. There was no excuse for how Nick acted, and consequences needed to be real. Second, I'm done paying for family outings, vacations, dinners, all that. If they want to live the high life, that's on them, with the exception of Tracy, who will always be welcome. Third, if I hear any more crap about me behind my back, I'll start making them pay for my childcare services. I stressed my pride as a man, how I can't have that disrespected, not even by family, though honestly, I don't even see Nick as family, but he doesn't need to know that. Nick was furious. My sister actually had to take him outside for a private chat, but eventually, they both came back and agreed to my terms. I got the apology I wanted, half-hearted and awkward, but I'll take it. Sure, I could have pushed harder, but I didn't want to risk having to back down or, worse, causing more pain for Tracy. No tears, no hugs, nothing warm, but I left with exactly what I needed, some payback, some boundaries, and Tracy still in my life. I still want to talk to my sister alone about her relationship with Nick and where I fit in, but I'm going to let things cool off for a bit first. This might not be the Hollywood ending some people would want, but at the end of it all, I had to settle on something I could live with, and this is it. If anything changes, I'll update. Update 2. I don't even know how to put this frustration into words. It's not as though my sister has done anything wrong, she's not cruel or inconsiderate, I'm just bone deep exhausted. I feel like I'm stretched so thin that there's barely anything left of me to give. Everything feels overwhelming. A few months ago, my whole world shifted. My mom's health suddenly plummeted. She began a new treatment, and it threw her immune system completely out of balance. The next thing I knew, she had an infection and just died, within weeks. One moment she was her old self, then she had a flare-up with her MS, and suddenly everything was over. It was like I couldn't even process the whiplash of her being there and then simply not. Before I could even start to process losing my mom, my sister called me and told me she was getting divorced. I don't blame her. Her ex's behavior during mom's illness and after she passed made leaving him the only possible option. But suddenly, my sister was relying on me for everything. Emotional support, childcare, it all fell to me. There was a time when I could always be there for her, but now I just can't in the same way. I have my own job, my own kids, my own exhaustion. I can't stay on the phone for 2 hours at 2 a.m. anymore, then wake up and function like I did when I was 23. Her ex is making the divorce hellish. He changes his mind, makes up issues, rejects things they already agreed on, and it drags everyone, lawyers, social workers, judges, into pointless, energy-sapping arguments. That all takes so much of her time and peace, and I end up shouldering so much of it, too. Some of his antics are so petty, I can barely believe them. For instance, he once used her spare car key to take his daughter's car seat, apparently because it was a gift from his mother or, simply to spite her. He didn't tell her. He just left her without a car seat, so I had to rush over with mine. Ridiculous, unnecessary drama. And they're still trying to sell their house because the mortgage is a nightmare, way beyond what they can reasonably afford. But the sale has to go through one set of lawyers for the divorce and another for the property, which makes every single step a bureaucratic hell and leaves everyone even more exhausted. I want to be there for my sister and my niece, God, I want that more than anything, but I am just so tired. I'm snapping more at my kids, my patience is fraying away. I hate that the little ones, none of whom are at fault, are feeling the consequences the most. But I can't figure out what to do. I keep thinking about therapy, but I genuinely don't have the time right now. My wife is incredible and supportive, but her job is insanely demanding. She helps where she can, but these problems aren't hers to fix, she can only take on so much. So I keep going. I soldier on, because what else is there? But every day just feels harder, and I'm running on empty. Update 3. Yesterday I was halfway through a Zoom when daycare called to confirm that I'd picked Tracy up early. My stomach just fell through the floor. I hadn't. Barb hadn't. It was Nick. Barb and I met in the parking lot with our hearts in our throats, and the director was pale and apologizing. They'd seen him so many times before, he said he had a doctor's appointment for Tracy, and they let her go. There's a temporary order in place that spells out pickup days, but it was in Barb's glove compartment, not at the front desk. We called the police and I started driving, because moving felt better than sitting still. He wasn't at his apartment. He turned his phone off. For 3 hours, we didn't know where she was. I've never seen my sister like that. She made those awful, empty calls to hospitals and urgent care centers, just in case. I circled all the places he likes to pretend he's a fun dad at: arcade, trampoline park, his mother's house. Nothing. I only saw them once in that time, when a patrol car rolled by and asked us to stop driving around and wait for updates. The officer was kind and clipped, the voice people use when they know if they say anything soft they'll cry. He finally texted Barb from his mother's landline, a picture of Tracy on the couch eating a popsicle, like he hadn't just put everyone through hell. He said we were overreacting. The police went, confirmed she wasn't hurt, reminded him of the order, and escorted her out to Barb. When she got to me, she wrapped both arms around my waist and didn't let go. I carried her to the car. She fell asleep with her hand knotted in my shirt. I don't think I'll ever forget the shape of her little fingers holding on like that. We were in court this morning. Emergency hearing. Nick came in with his smirk, like he'd gamed the system, and left with a judge telling him, in an even, bored voice that somehow cut harder than yelling, that if he pulled a stunt like that again, he'd lose unsupervised time altogether. Exchanges are now at the police station lobby only, with a log. He has to give 48 hours notice for any scheduled changes. He tried to argue that we alienate him by not being flexible. The judge asked if he'd notified anyone before picking his child up. He stared at his shoes. It was the first time in months I felt like someone with authority saw through him. That night, after the hearing, I went to my mom's house with Barb. We've been dragging our feet on clearing it out, too heavy, but the place has been sitting and starting to smell like dust and old soap. We made coffee and stood in the kitchen for a long time, both of us looking everywhere but at the table where she used to sit. I opened a drawer to find spare batteries and found a little stack of envelopes with our names. Barb's was on top. Mine was underneath. Same blue pen, same tidy handwriting that never changed no matter how her hands shook some days. I read mine on the porch steps because I knew if I read it inside I'd hear her voice. It wasn't long, and it wasn't profound in the way movies make those things. She told me she knew I'd always try to carry everyone, and she loved me for it, and that she hoped I'd remember I didn't have to go it alone. You don't owe the fire all your wood to keep it burning, she wrote. You are allowed to be warm too. I sat out there until the mosquitoes realized I was free dinner. Barb joined me with hers. She didn't say what it said, just pressed her head on my shoulder and cried like she had permission to. We made some decisions. Not sweeping, righteous ones, just small, specific ones. Tracy started school-based counseling this week. One of the social workers from the court helped rush it. The counselor is soft-spoken and unflappable, and she let Tracy bring her stuffed rabbit and hold its ears while they talked. When I picked her up after the first session, she told me she drew a picture of our house, which, when she held it up, was a rectangle with 3 little figures holding hands and 1 stick figure with spiky hair outside a circle. I asked who the spiky-haired one was, and she said, very seriously, a porcupine. I asked, does the porcupine have a name? She said sometimes. That was the first time any of us laughed in days. It was small and broken and exactly right. I also told Barb that I can't be the default anymore, not like I was. I love my niece more than I know how to say, but I'm cracking. We found an after-school program with a long wait list. The counselor pushed her up because of everything going on. It's not perfect, it's not my living room and Bluey and grilled cheese, but it's consistent. I still get her 2 afternoons a week, non-negotiable for my sanity and hers. Barb didn't fight me. She just nodded, eyes red, and said she'd make it work. For once I believed her. The house finally sold. The closing was chaos. His lawyer forgot a document, he refused to come into the same room as Barb, and at one point he tried to argue about the microwave like it was a family heirloom. It got done because the judge made it clear it would get done. They wired the money and Barb walked out with enough to breathe without feeling like she was stealing air. She signed a lease on a smaller place 10 minutes from us. It's an old duplex with a laughably slanted upstairs, but the backyard has a maple tree big enough to make its own shade, and Tracy stood under it and announced it was a castle. I hung her curtain rods and left my drill there on purpose. Work noticed. I missed a deadline last week. My manager slid into my messages with a "Hey, is everything okay?" in that corporate tone that's half caring, half HR. I told him the bare minimum. He offered me a 2-week extension on some deliverables and flagged a project to someone else without making me feel like I'd failed. I shut my laptop at 5 for the first time in months and just sat on the floor with my kids and built a lopsided Lego zoo. It sounds like nothing. It felt like passing a finish line. Nick tried to drop a box at my house the other night, old toys, apparently. The exchange orders explicitly say police station only. I watched him on the doorbell camera standing there, shifting his weight, looking up like he wanted to be seen. I didn't open the door. I called Barb and told her to tell her lawyer. It was almost boring, like swatting a mosquito instead of wrestling a bear. He got a curt email the next morning reminding him of the order and outlining what happens if he keeps testing it. He didn't reply. He will, but not today. I'm still so tired. That hasn't magically changed, but the edges aren't as sharp this week. Things are starting to look like a life instead of a fire I'm always running toward with a bucket that never fills. On Tuesday, after school, Tracy and my 2 were on the rug watching Bluey, again, and I was in the kitchen making quesadillas. My daughter yelled that Bingo was being very brave, and Tracy yelled back that sometimes being brave is being scared and doing it anyway. I don't know where she heard it. Maybe the counselor. Maybe she just knew. Either way, I leaned against the counter and let myself cry for a minute, so quietly the sizzle of the pan covered it, and then I plated dinner and we ate. I don't have a ribbon to tie on this. There's a custody review in a month. There will be more stunts, more appointments, more days where I forget to drink water until my head hurts. But I'm not alone. My wife is still my anchor. My sister is standing on her own feet again, shaky but steadying. My mom is gone and somehow still here, telling me from a blue ink envelope to keep some warmth for myself. And my niece knows she has a place to land, no matter what. That's enough to keep moving. Update 4. The knock came right when the quesadillas hit the pan. Not a neighbor knock. Sharp, official. I wiped my hands and opened the door to a woman with a canvas tote and a badge on a lanyard. She introduced herself, said she was following up on a report. We got a call about yelling in the home, she added, eyes kind in that practiced way that doesn't soften anything. She had a notebook and a pen she clicked 3 times before she wrote anything. I let her in. There was nowhere to hide. The living room had crayons under the couch and a half-built zoo taking over the rug. My 2 barreled out of their room like I'd announced a parade. Tracy stepped from behind me and pressed her fingers into the fabric at my hip, that same steady anchor grip. The caseworker, Maya, knelt, asked their names, told them she liked their animals. She asked if she could see where they sleep, where we keep the snacks, where we put our shoes. The kind of questions that feel like nothing and also like a test you study for without knowing how. She talked to me at the kitchen counter while the cheese started to brown. Had there been any incidents? Any fights? Any raised voices? I told her the truth. There's always noise because we have small children in life, but no, nothing like what the report suggested. She asked if there was anyone who might want to cause us trouble. I didn't say a name. I didn't have to. She wrote something down, clicked her pen again, and then sat on the floor to ask the kids about their day. Tracy told her about our castle under the maple tree at the new place and that she doesn't like green beans unless they are secretly peas. Maya smiled at that. She asked if she ever felt unsafe. Tracy thought for a long, worried second like there might be a right answer and then said, I don't like the porcupine's car. Maya looked at me. I didn't breathe. She asked, what do you do when you don't like it? Tracy nodded hard. I sit in Uncle's car. It smells like gum. Maya left with a soft thank you and a promise to circle back. The kitchen smelled like toasted tortillas and anxiety. Later that night, Barb called to say the same knock came at her door, same tote, same badge. The report had our addresses transposed under a thin layer of anonymous. We didn't need to guess. 2 days later, the exchange almost went sideways in a different way. Police station lobby. Those glossy chairs that squeak when you shift. Tracy was coloring a bear with a green belly and telling me it was a frog wearing a costume. Nick swung in late and when he did, the air changed. It wasn't anything obvious at first. Just something in the way he kept blinking, the way his keys missed the counter by an inch when he set them down. He bent to hug Tracy and she froze. It was a small flinch, the kind kids are born knowing how to make invisible. One of the officers behind the glass looked up and pressed the button under the desk. He stepped out with that careful calm they use when they're trying to buy time from a bad moment. He asked if everything was okay. Nick said he was fine. The word stretched. The officer asked if he'd be willing to wait 15 minutes. He wasn't asking. Nick laughed like it was a joke and then said he had somewhere to be. The officer's partner appeared in the doorway and asked for a quick word. It took seconds for the conversation to turn quiet and clipped. I don't know what they asked him out of the shot, but he came back red and rigid and said he'd be filing a complaint about harassment, and then walked straight into the metal detector with his belt and made the whole lobby jump. Barb showed 5 minutes later with her lawyer on speed dial. The officers wrote their report, noted odor consistent with alcohol, and suggested no handoff. Tracy went home with Barb. Nick stood at the glass and talked to his reflection about rights until the receptionist asked him to step outside. I put Tracy in the car. She sniffed my sleeve and said, gum. I wanted to laugh and throw up at the same time. The review hearing came fast because of that lobby report and the CPS visits. The judge had the same even tone as last time, but this time he sounded tired. Nick started with a speech about alienation that sounded rehearsed from YouTube. The judge let him talk himself into a corner, then asked him, without changing expression, if he understood that anonymous isn't anonymous in a system where reports are cross-referenced and timestamps line up with his missed calls. He then read from the officer's notes like he was reading a grocery list. Diffuse odor. Unsteady. Bump the magnetometer. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He suspended unsupervised time and ordered supervised visits at the family center downtown. 10 to 2 on Saturdays, 2 rooms, a glass wall, a social worker with a clipboard. Parenting classes. Alcohol assessment. He told Nick this wasn't punishment, it was protection. Then he looked at Barb and said what I didn't realize I needed a stranger with power to say, you're doing the right things. It felt like a small blessing, right there between the fluorescent lights and the stale air. Nick blew in the hallway after. Not a fight, that would be too on the nose. More like a hiss. He called me an audience and told me to enjoy my little victory. His mother was behind him, small and wiry and wearing a blouse with birds on it, and she kept saying his name, like, if she said it enough he'd turn into a person she wanted to claim. The bailiff stood at the end of the hall with his arms folded like a sculpture of a wall. Nothing more happened, and that was the point. We took Tracy to the center for the first supervised visit last Saturday. It's an old office building that someone softened with rugs and plastic plants and posters that say things like feelings are valid in bubbly letters. Tracy held the stuffed rabbit by the ears and asked me if I could drink coffee in the little kitchen until she was done. You can see me through the glass, she added, like she was the one reassuring me. The social worker, a guy with a gentle belly and a haircut that belonged to a different decade, introduced himself to everyone like we were neighbors. Nick came on time. He brought a board game with half the pieces missing. Tracy sat on her knees and beat him at Candyland and told him about the maple tree. He said that's nice like he was reading a script. When the 2 hours were up, she didn't look back. She walked straight to the door and held her rabbit out like a passport to the life she wanted to go back to. I didn't drink the coffee. I watched the whole time through the glass with my hands flat against my paper cup until it went cold. That afternoon, I found one of my mom's notebooks in a box I thought held holiday plates. Not a letter this time, just a long list of things nobody would think to write down unless they knew they'd need to remember their own hands. How long to simmer the bones for broth? Where she kept the spare batteries and why? Which neighbors will actually bring your mail in and which will forget? At the very bottom of a page, between leave the plant someone else can keep alive and do not let Barb buy a car on a Tuesday because she gets superstitious when things break midweek, she'd written a soup recipe I didn't recognize. It said for when everything is too much. The instructions were bossy in a way that made me laugh out loud. Don't rush the onion. Don't skip the bay leaf just because you can't taste it. Salt 3 times, a little each. Sit down while it simmers. The last line said eat in bowls that make you feel like you have enough. I made it that night. The onion softened the whole house. The kids came in on the smell. Barb knocked, hair up, face bare in that way that means there was no time to pretend she'd rested. We ate with the window cracked and the summer finally loosening its grip. Tracy blew on her spoon like a miniature factory and told me this was cozy soup. My wife squeezed my knee under the table. We didn't toast or talk about resilience. We just sat quiet and warm and full for as long as it lasted. Sunday he tried to drop off a bag of forgotten clothes at my door again. The words pinged my phone from the doorbell camera. A shadow shifting weight, a hand half lifting toward the bell and then dropping. I watched him in grayscale and didn't move. He looked straight at the lens and said, "Tell her I tried," and left the bag on the mat. I texted Barb and then her lawyer. The bag went into the trunk and then to the station. The officer at the front desk scanned the order and slid the bag into a back room like it was evidence. Maybe it is. Maybe everything is, if you tilt it right. Work is a different kind of evidence. My manager sent me a link to an EAP I'd pretended didn't exist and told me I could take the Thursday morning slot if I wanted before stand-up. I clicked yes before I could talk myself out of it. I sat in my car in the daycare lot with the AC on and a woman on my phone telling me my metaphors were doing a lot of heavy lifting. I told her about the fire and the wood. She told me about smoke detectors and neighbors and how nobody tells you the boring parts are the most heroic. It felt less like therapy and more like a breather in a stairwell between floors. I'll take it. Today, under the maple, Tracy wobbled by on a bike with white streamers and training wheels that don't do much but make everyone feel better. She yelled, "Watch me." Every time she circled. I did. She stopped once, sudden, and put both feet down, breathing hard. "I can do it scared," she announced to the antline crawling by her wheel. I told her I knew. She grinned like she'd told me a secret, and then she took off again, knees pumping, hair stuck to her forehead, a small person moving forward because that's what small people do when given the room. There's another hearing in 6 weeks to review the supervision. There will be more paperwork, more dull rooms, more chances to be brave in the most boring ways. I keep thinking of my mom's note about bay leaves. You don't notice them if they're doing their job. You only notice when they're missing and everything tastes thin. So I'm salting a little each time. I'm not opening the door when I don't have to. I'm watching through the glass when I do. And when the house smells like broth and a cartoon dog laughs from the living room, I sit down while it simmers. For the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.